Welcome to SAM Conversation, a program of South Asia Monitor. I'm Col Anil Bhat. The topic today for us is Afghanistan's fallout. Is Pakistan reaping the whirlwind? It's my pleasure to welcome Lieutenant General Vinod Bhatia, former Director General Military Operations, former Director Center for Joint Warfare Studies. Then we have he's a paratrooper who's had lots of experience both against the Chinese and the Pakistanis. We have Iqbal Chand Malhotra, who I cannot help but reiterating that he's a hound of history. He heads AIM Television and is. Then we have Mukul Shukla. Pleasure to have you here with us, Mukul. He spent a couple of decades with the Hindustan Times. Then he was the editor of the Sahara Group and Narad News. As far as Afghanistan is concerned, it took the United States of America a month after leaving Afghanistan, at least, for some senators to begin speaking about Pakistan's role in the United States' defeat in Afghanistan. And there do not seem to be enough senior American politicians to convey the long list of Pakistan's monkey tricks against the US, which cost them very dearly in the number of fatal casualties of their troops in Afghanistan. And it seems that US is not yet done anything, or I don't know whether they expected to do anything like jettisoning Pakistan, leave alone punish Pakistan. The latest justification not to do so, not to take any stringent actions against Pakistan is, that they are they have a nuclear arsenal. Well, that nuclear arsenal got built under the Nelson's eye of the US. Very ironically, it grew greatly under the American Nelson eye. Of course, there are other indications about Pakistan's involvement in post-Taliban ruled Afghanistan, which make us take note and make us wonder what Pakistan's future is going to be. The ISIS Khorasan has already shown its colors in Afghanistan with one major strike. Pakistan it's not going to be hunky-dory for Pakistan in its involvement in Taliban affairs of Taliban-ruled Afghanistan. At least for long. As far as India is concerned, it's the export of terror by Pakistan continues unabated, maybe even more in the last, or you can say since February, we had an agreement of a ceasefire. That ceasefire has been violated umpteen times. There are at least 80 terrorists who've been killed from the 1st of January till the end of September, many of whom are big guns, so-called commanders. The attrition rate has been high. Now the latest is a young Ali Babar Patra, 19-year-old Punjabi from Pakistan's Punjab, who surrendered. He tells the tales of how he was motivated, trained, and anyway, he's put out a long confession. We won't go into that. I think it's high time we hand the floor to you all. We start with Gen Bhatia.
Thank you, Colonel Bhatsa. Thank you very much. Honored to be invited by you on this excellent platform with two very prominent and distinguished panelists. Thank you very much. What you said is absolutely right. I start by quoting Lieutenant General Hamid Gul. He is the former Director General of the ISI of Pakistan, and on a Pakistani television talk show, he said, and I quote, in Afghanistan, that is, Pakistan defeated the Soviet Union with the help of the United States, and thereafter defeated the United States with the help of the United States. He said this much to the glee and laughter of the audience. Profound words these. However, what he left unsaid is a postscript. I am sure he realized that as a former Director General of ISI, that Pakistan, with the help of Taliban, will defeat Pakistan in the future. So that is something which I think he has left unsaid. However, I also feel that, especially as a former soldier, we should never underestimate the rationale of our adversaries. That Pakistan is an adversary, it's a mischievous neighbor and adversary, and we should not underestimate Pakistan. That's something which we should never do. Something which I think the US could not or did not want to read. I will not say could not read. I will not give them that capability. So what Pakistan really done in the last 2 decades is, as they say, run with the hares and hunted with the hounds. It was a win-win situation. It has been strategically smart. It has done what most other countries fail to do. It has taken full advantage of its geostrategic location. In a win-win situation, it supported the US in the global war of terror post 9/11. There was opposition against Pervez Musharraf at the Corps Commanders Conference, but he overruled everyone. And at the same time, they supported the Taliban. If the US won, Pakistan won. If the Taliban won, Pakistan won. If no one won, Pakistan still won, because Pakistan army, which drives the policy in Pakistan, whether it's foreign policy, the defense policy, the economic policy, were getting paid for by the US. Not only the military grants, even the logistic support to Afghanistan. US had burnt bridges with Iran. So the only place left for them to influence and to support the operations and to get intelligence against the Al-Qaeda was through Pakistan. So Pakistan, I think, has been strategically very smart. They have played an excellent game. And it's only in the last month or so that we see senators and all the great strategic thinkers or think tanks in the US and the West talking about the Pakistani role in defeating the US and supporting the Taliban. But Taliban always supported by Pakistan. Taliban is the creation of the US as the Mujahideen of the US and Pakistan. And Pakistan for the last 2 decades has openly supported and sponsored Taliban. They have trained Taliban. Osama bin Laden was 150 meters away from the Pakistan military academy in Abbottabad when he was neutralized in an operation. So it's not that the Americans didn't know it. That's why I refuse to believe that. But I suppose it was a win-win situation. It served the US purpose as long as it lasted. It served the US military purpose. It also, in a way, was driven by the massive military-industrial complex of the US, which has to create conflict somewhere in the world. We should understand that. By account, there are 77 conflicts which are initiated or created by the US post-Second World War. Why I say that is because India should realize the real politics behind it, the real games behind it, and the emerging world order to understand that we need to take advantage, linkages, and leverages of our interests and not the balance of power. So having said that, what did Pakistan actually do? So Pakistan, when they trained the Taliban, and Taliban is a ragtag organization the US, the mightiest military technologically and otherwise in the world, has suddenly got a schedule. But that sudden withdrawal from Bagram Air Base was embarrassing to the say the least. It has emboldened Taliban. It has emboldened the terrorist groups the world over, whether it is the Jaish, whether it is LET, whether ISIS, K, as you spoke about, Al Qaeda resurfaced. They made a statement. So they have really, given oxygen to the jihadis, to the terrorist organizations, and there will be a call for global jihad. This is happening earlier, and somehow it was subdued, but now they smell victory. As far as Afghanistan is concerned, Afghanistan has always been wanting what they call Afghan-led, an Afghan-owned, and an Afghan-controlled peaceful solution. What they've actually got is an Afghan-led, possibly, an Afghan-owned, all right, but a Pakistani-controlled, not peaceful, I would say, but a semi-violent solution. Because Taliban, whatever you may call Taliban, Taliban 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, whatever you may call it, Taliban is Taliban. So Taliban is.
Vinod, we are very well brought out, but I'll stop you here. We have, because we have a lot more to say.
Right.
Mukul, please join in.
Yeah.
With your thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you, Anil. I would just elaborate on what General Bhatia had said. And this by 2010 or 2011, the US knew that Taliban is ISI. In fact, Obama had mentioned about this fact in his memoir, which was published not too long ago, 2013 or 14, sometime then. And then you had this Admiral Mike Mellon's a special assistant called Sarah Chase. She had informed the admiral who was then Joint Chief of the Staff, the highest ranking officer in the US military, that unless we remove the corruption which is made in America from our operations in Afghanistan, we are not going to win. The problem was the money that was, all this money, $2 trillion or $3 trillion that is being talked about. Much of it, actually $1 trillion went to their contractors, etc. And then, everyone faulted, we faulted, the US faulted. Then, there are reports again filed by Sarah Chase that both this fellow, Hamid Karzai, as well as Ashraf Ghani, they were playing both sides. In fact, before leaving the presidency, Hamid Karzai was already using, according to NSD, that intelligence chief, Amarullah, that he was already using the term like brother for Talibanis. By means the United States messed up. If you look at our own operation, basically it was not a military disaster, it was a civilian disaster, because it was the whole thing was carried out through several administrations, starting from Bush to Obama to this Trump, and then finally Biden. Look at our own CIA operations. The military does the right thing. It creates the environment. The levers of state gets passed on to the civilian administration, and then they make a mess of the whole thing. Look at Nagaland, look at other places, it's the same situation. The civilian mess up, it is the same thing that happened, according to me. That's precisely what happened in Afghanistan. The civil means several various US administration failed to recognize the fact that the kind of corruption they were creating in Afghanistan, whereby no money, none of that aid was reaching the normal ordinary people in Afghanistan, was the main cause for encouragement to Taliban. You see, when you start, all of you are military officers, you know that you shake up one fellow on the road in a counterinsurgency area, you create three counterinsurgents. If the army or security authority, they start misbehaving with the civilian population, it doesn't augur well for fighting a counterinsurgency operation. The same thing happened under the eyes of the US Army, the Afghan military, Afghan security personnel. They treated the ordinary Afghanis so badly that they tilted in favor of Taliban. And Taliban the Pakistanis were waiting for this kind of opportunity. And moreover, these people who inhabit the land between Indus and Jhelum, they are very smart and clever people, you know, the Khokhars and Janjuas and this Kayani, they have got 1,000 years of experience in how to defeat an invader. So they played on their historically learned techniques and defeated the US. Here, I would not agree with this fellow called the Hamid Gul fellow. You know, he was such a disaster. You know, I may just remind you of the failed Jalalabad operation, which was executed by him. It was a disaster. And thereafter, his star actually sunk. Whatever he may say now that we defeated US with Taliban or US with US help is a different matter. You know, anyone can say many things. But basically, the disaster in Afghanistan was a creation of Washington itself.
Thank you, Mukul. Thank you for some very typical of you, the way you pull out, inputs and facts from the past. But I now look forward to Iqbal, who also is, as I said, he's too much on history. But please, Iqbal.
Yeah. What shall I speak on? Because I lost track because the electricity went off.
No. Listen, you have the theme in front of us.
Okay, all right.
The effect of what is going to be Pakistan's future, because a lot of what happens there affects us.
Okay. Well, first let me pose this question, and I'll answer it as well. Who controls Pakistan? So now the army controls Pakistan.
Yeah,
Pakistan army controls Pakistan.
Absolutely.
And who controls the Pakistan army? Largely Punjabis, 80%, and 20% are Pashtuns. Now, the situation is that the Pakistan army has got a country to play around with, and they largely define the course of action the country is going to take. And Pakistan is a country which is constrained by its economy because it doesn't have very many natural resources, and it doesn't have an industrial base. So the question is this, that when you have an economy which is a constraint, you have a large population which is close to poverty, and you have a feudal land-owning system, how do you then generate money for the ambitions of the army? Now, I'll just digress a little bit, and I'll explain why I say that the army is ambitious. Because the Punjabi Musalman was the majority, constituted a significant majority of the Indian army that fought in the First World War, and also in the Second World War. Now, in the First World War, the promise was that, look, if we give you Muslim soldiers to fight in the First World War, then please ensure that the Ottoman Empire remains, it doesn't collapse. And the British then decided to dismantle the Ottoman Empire. And after that, there's a very interesting poem written by Sir Muhammad Iqbal called Jawab-e-Shikwa, where he remonstrates with Allah and says that, look, we fought for you, we fought for Islam, but then why did you invoke this retribution on us, and why did you destroy the Ottoman Empire, which was the grandest empire of Islam at that time in the 20th century? And then in the Second World War, they were also a significant component of the 2.5 million soldiers of the Indian army that fought on behalf of the Allies against the Germans and the Japanese. And again, their promise of a Pakistan was defeated, and they got a moth-eaten Pakistan in many ways, which was not really a very viable country. It was top-heavy, loaded in favor of the Punjabis. And within the Punjabi Muslims as well, there were two distinct kind of identities. One was the original Muslim who had probably been converted to Islam 200-300 years ago. And then there were those Hindus and Sikhs and Jat Sikhs who had converted to Islam post the collapse of Maharaja Ranjit Singh's empire and post the First War of Independence, 1857, because in other parts of North India, while the British were persecuting the Muslims, in the Punjab, there was a kind of a harmony or a symbiosis between the Hindus and Sikhs on one side and the Muslims on the other, that the Hindus and Sikhs controlled the land. They were the landed gentry. And the Muslims had, they dominated the culture. So the culture of Punjab was Islamic, whereas the economic power was with the Hindus and Sikhs. And the British then proceeded to break this harmony in 1901 with the Punjab Land Alienation Act, which basically said that land goes back to the tiller. So the harmony of the Hindus and Sikhs and Muslims was disrupted, and the Hindus and Sikhs began to seek their own Hindu and Sikh identity as distinct from this sort of overall, homogeneous kind of Punjabi identity or Punjabiyat that existed. So the Punjabi Mussalman felt that in 47 he was victimized. And ever since then, they have been trying to be recognized as the dominant, most educated, and most ambitious part of the Islamic Ummah, because they have contempt for the Arabs. If you have ever interacted with any Pakistanis, you'll know that they all make jokes about the Arabs. They have contempt for all the other nationalities of Islam, and they believe that they are the cleverest and the brightest people, and they need to be brought onto the high table with the Americans to regulate the world. Now, these are grandiose ambitions. So they were constrained by money. And being Punjabis, very wily people, very industrious, they decided that, look, how do we generate money? And the first opportunity came when the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. And the Soviet jihad became a money spinner for the Pakistan Army and the ISI, which then became a state within a state within a state. So the army controlled the Pakistan, and the ISI then had a very dominant influence on the army. And they were then given the responsibility of generating income and revenues. So the first thing they did was that they milked the Americans and the Saudis dry during the Soviet jihad. The second discovery they made was that opium, which was grown in Afghanistan, was a money spinner. There were the Vietnam War had caused widespread heroin addiction in America, and they began to refine the supply lines of opium out of Afghanistan into the former Soviet Union when it collapsed, and then down into Western Europe and into North America. So opium became the third source of revenue. Then when this war of terror happened and this 9/11 happened, after all, it was the Pakistanis that were behind it. And in fact, there are, I don't want to go into all those instances which the Americans overlooked. And they decided that they needed the land route into Afghanistan, and they also needed a war to boost their economy.
I now put a question. It's all very well, that Pakistan created the Taliban. And it has been able to control it. But now the Taliban in Afghanistan, or the Afghan Taliban, again created by Pakistan, but now controlling Afghanistan in a slightly different format from earlier. At least they dressed better. Earlier they were, a ragtag, ragamuffins, all top to bottom. Now at least the ones who are sitting in the parliament, so to speak, are a little better dressed. And they're trying to convey an impression of being, Taliban, second avatar, which is supposed to be more civilized than the first. That should, I hope no country in the world is, gullible or naive enough to think that. Won't there come a time when interests will clash? When the Taliban in Afghanistan, the ruling Taliban in Afghanistan, first may start fighting amongst themselves, or interest clashing with the Rawalpindi, general headquarters in Rawalpindi. General Bhatia.
Absolutely, I think you have hit the nail on the head. It is not the present and the past which really matters now. It is what happened, I would say, even the near term, near to mid term. Because Taliban 2.0, or what we want to call it, you can rule with the gun, you can't govern with the gun. In the daily life, the people of Afghanistan want governance. Afghanistan is a divided nation. It has got fissures. It has got about 38% Pashtuns, and then it's got Tajiks, and it's got Hazaras, and they have not been given the inclusive government which everyone is talking about has not really come about. And it is a government formulated in Kabul by the Pakistan DGISI was personally present out there, and brought a fair share of the Haqqani group, which is total allegiance to the ISI. And the Minister of Interior is a Haqqani, Sayyidun Haqqani. So we see, what we see actually is a civil war. It is Panjshir has already been there. Afghanistan historically again has always fought together against a foreign invader, whether the British or the Soviet Union or even the Americans. But when the foreign invaders have not been there, they have been warlords. The tribal loyalties are very strong, and the warlords still have their own constituency and geographical areas. So I do feel that there is all likelihood of a civil war. The legitimacy which the Afghan government, which the Taliban government, I would say Taliban government of Afghanistan, which it seeks, has not been given by anyone other than Pakistan. I mean, China has been talking about it. It's given 31 million aid. But the legitimacy has not been given. So what I foresee is a sort of a inter-tribal war leading to a civil war, and the civil war has all the potential of spreading to the neighborhood. And when I talk about the neighborhood, I talk about the CAR, I talk about Pakistan directly, because as Iqbal is trying to bring out, it is the Pashtuns versus Pashtuns. There are 3 million Pashtuns already on the Durand Line, and Durand Line, as Taliban is very clear about, the Durand Line has not been resolved, and there is a difference in the Pakistan viewpoint of Durand Line and that of the Taliban itself. And Pakistan has created 200 km long fence along the Durand Line again. So we feel, I feel that there will be a civil war with spillover towards Pakistan, which also is not very good for India, because we need a stable region, a peaceful region. And if the region is volatile and region has got security issues, it is surely going to impact India to some extent. I'm not trying to say that the Taliban will not fight at the behest of ISI in Kashmir. Well, it might. But let me assure you that we are fully prepared. We have a very effective counter-infiltration grid, having spent a number of years along the line of control. We have a very excellent counter-infiltration grid, and the recent infiltration attempts have all failed. And we also have a very good counter-terrorism grid. But that is not all. We will have to look at drugs flowing into Punjab. We also have borders in Rajasthan, Gujarat. So there will be an effect. And more so, there will be a call for a global jihad, because this is given oxygen to the jihadis. So internally, we'll have to look at our population, and Pakistan will be the most affected, because the poor in Pakistan, the poor masses in Pakistan, they'll be the target of jihad, and the jihad which comes into Pakistan will have the potential to spread all over.
Yes, interesting. It gets very interesting once you start looking at all the divisions of the Afghan society. So far, it's a very, very bad scene for the Afghan population. Iqbal,
I'm sorry, I must apologize.
I know you're having a
raise
power
the
problem.
electricity unprecedented. Maybe it's an ISI plot to sabotage, but it just went. So if I pick up where I got interrupted
No,
by the
don't worry.
power cut,
To just bring you up to update you, I'd put up the question that what will be the future equations between, even if Pakistan is the one which created the Taliban, Afghanistan Taliban and Pakistan Taliban, whatever. But will there come a time when the interests among the Taliban, ruling Taliban of Afghanistan themselves, and as rulers of Afghanistan have differences with their directors in Rawalpindi? Vinod Bhatia had some very interesting observations. I am sure Mukul also will. Go on, please shoot on this.
Actually, let's put it this way: that who created the Taliban? The Taliban was created by General Nasirullah Babur, who was the interior minister in Benazir Bhutto's government between 1994 and 1997. And the Taliban was created because there was civil war raging in Afghanistan, since the Mujahideen, after winning the war against the Soviets and after the Soviet withdrawal, were unable to work together. And Pakistan's nominee at that time, Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, was engaged in a bitter battle with Commander Ahmad Shah Massoud. And you must understand that there is an ethnic divide in Afghanistan. There are Pashtuns who are about 42% of the population. 28% of the population are Tajiks. The Pashtun language is Pashto. The Tajik language is Dari, which is similar to Farsi. And there are the Uzbeks, there are the Hazaras, and there are the Turkmens. So there is an ethnic divide. And this ethnic divide was papered over when the British installed that puppet king in the 1870s, and lasted till 1972, when Sardar Daud Khan revolted in that coup d'etat against King Zahir Shah. And then the cracks began to appear in the ethnic divide. And in fact, because the Pashtuns were not pro-Pakistani at that time, the Pakistanis used the Tajiks to actually unsettle the Pashtuns, because the Pashtuns were then more pro-Soviet and more pro-left. But then later on, the sides got reversed. So Pakistan created the Taliban, and they had this fancy concept of strategic depth, so that they can move their air bases into Afghanistan in the event of a conventional war in the 1970s with India, and that the Indian Air Force couldn't then bomb their targets, because after 1971, when the Indian Air Force at will hammered the Pakistanis, and the fact that the Indian Army thrust into the Hyderabad Sindh sector, and the Soviets themselves did not want, post the fall of Dhaka, they did not want West Pakistan to be carved up into 2 or 3 different entities. And there's a very interesting book called Will Pakistan Survive by Tariq Ali. And the first edition was published in 1982. And in that first edition, in the footnotes, it was mentioned that the reason why Mrs. Gandhi pulled her punches and didn't thrust into West Pakistan was because the Soviet ambassador at that time showed her photographs, satellite photographs of the Iranian army amassed on the Balochistan border. And he argued and said that the Shah of Iran has got 5 divisions on the Balochistan border. And if you move in, he will meet you on the west bank of the Indus. So in that effect, India will then become a part of the extended Middle East. And do you want to remove Pakistan as a buffer between yourselves in the Middle East? And then what will happen is that the Americans also will not, sit tight and not do anything, because Pakistan is a bridge towards their rapprochement with China. So Mrs. Gandhi, in all her wisdom, was convinced by the Russians to declare the ceasefire. Now, coming back to this issue of the Taliban. So the Taliban was created by the Pakistanis, and they dominated the scene in Afghanistan for 5-6 years till 2001. Now, post 2001, when the Americans came into Afghanistan, they obviously used the Northern Alliance and the Tajiks to facilitate their entry into the theater of war, and all the targets and everything was lit up. And in fact, if you read this book by Gary Schoen, who led the CIA team in, he said he came with $5 million cash, and he distributed that cash to Marshal Fahim, whom I had occasion to meet when I went there in 2001, and to General Dostum, and all the disparaging armies, or the sort of, not disparaging, but the, what is the right word? The ragtag armies, remnants of the Northern Alliance, then got together with those $5 million, and they then proceeded to assist the Americans into driving the Taliban into their sanctuaries in Pakistan. Now the question is that America has always had an ambivalent policy towards Pakistan. One policy is being made by the US Congress, and the second policy is being made by the CIA. And the CIA has propped up Pakistan and has provided funding and justification for Pakistan. And therefore, Pakistan has had to have a bogeyman to scare the Americans, to shake them for money. Now, who was the bogeyman? The first bogeyman was the Taliban. In 2005, the Taliban began to return to Afghanistan. I went to, my last trip to Afghanistan was in 2005. And I had in 2003 gone with the US 82nd Airborne Division to the Nangarhar province in an anti-terrorist operation. And there they found weapons and ordnance. And I have this American colonel on record. He says that this is not remnants from the Soviet invasion. These are out of the Pakistan ordnance factories. Here are the markings. And we filmed them. So in 2005, the Taliban began to return. And then this entire structure of this TTP was created, Tehrik-e-Taliban-e-Pakistan, which was the new bogeyman. And out of the TTP, the man who founded this Islamic State, Khorasan, when this Baitullah Masood was killed by a US drone attack in, I think, 2010 or 2014, I don't remember the exact date, he then decided, out of what we call
will you please name the person who founded this Khorasan?
I can't remember his name now. He was he was the lieutenant of Baitullah Masood. Okay. And when he was kicked out of the TTP, he went and met that al-Baghdadi guy who was running the Islamic State. And he said, "Bhai, mujhe ye franchise de do." And he took the franchise of Islamic State. And what is Khorasan? Khorasan is Afghanistan and Pakistan. So he said, "I'll pay you so much royalty because this is the amount of money I'll be able to pick up from passage of goods, tariff on movement of goods and opium. And I'll give you so much, 5%, 10% of what my collections are." So al-Baghdadi was also very happy. And these guys are very happy. They got an identity. And the ISI was very happy because there was yet another bogeyman. So all these bogeymen, where did they come out from? They came out from the nursery school of the ISI, because everybody was given this training. And you must understand, as Mr. Shukla was saying before I got cut off, that these people in this Duab between the Jhelum and the Chenab, and particularly those who converted from Hinduism and Sikhism to Islam, whether you are Janjua, General Kakkar, General Kiani, General Bajwa, they consider themselves to be superior because they came from a higher class of Punjabi society and did not want to shun their identity, because the poorer Hindus and Sikhs who converted to Islam didn't want to carry their caste identity with them. These guys, whether they were Chauhans or Rajputs, or Janjuas or Kakkars or Bajwas or Sethis, they or Chaudhurys, they said कि भाई ਅਸੀਂ ਤੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ, we are part and parcel of the cream.
They could not.
So those guys had this view, where, clear view that look, this is the way that we want to go. Now these bogeymen were created, and these bogeymen then enabled the CIA to route money to them and through their slush funds. So in between, another source of revenue was this nuclear Walmart, this fellow AQ Khan. And when he was selling equipment and nuclear weapons to Gaddafi, and he was selling it to Kim Il-sung in North Korea, he was selling it to the Iranians. And after all, how could he, who was given by a C-130 by the Pakistani army, and he was allowed to fly all over the world selling his nuclear technology? And in one of the films I made in 2003, I've got a photograph of a Pakistani Air Force C-130 on the ground at Pyongyang airport. So the nuclear Walmart was there, and then this opium distribution. Now the thing is that the 22 American senators last Tuesday, they passed a bill, they moved a bill in the US Senate, which seeks to impose sanctions on Pakistan for aiding and assisting the Taliban and using non-state actors to assist the Taliban to come to power. Now that Pakistanis are shitting bricks, forgive my using this unparliamentary expression, because they're very worried what will be the impact of the sanctions. And the response is that the Pakistani rupee has crashed to 170 rupees to the dollar. For 3 days running, the Karachi Stock Exchange has fallen by 1,500 points because they import $6 billion worth of products every month. And that 6 billion will not be available to pay for it. Who's going to pay for it? Now, the Chinese will bankroll them to a certain extent, but they are not going to bankroll them indefinitely. And even if they bankroll them, they are not going to bankroll all these fanciful schemes.
Oh no, the Chinese already feel that they've been cheated in the road business.
When you are in the business of cheating the world, when you cheated the Americans, when you cheated the Saudis, then you're going to cheat the Chinese. You're a compulsive cheat because they have to get money, and the only way that they can get money is to create these bogeymen. Now, what is the Chinese aim out of Afghanistan? They have two aims. One is that they want to get hold of the copper, which is in a basic big mine, big deposit, 45 kilometers north of Kabul, and that copper mine. The Afghan government, then Afghan government under the American protection, had signed a deal with the Chinese. But what happened is that the Uyghur terrorists or the nationalists, freedom fighters, they came in and they began attacking the Chinese entire mining extraction machinery. Now, when they began attacking the Chinese and they destroyed their equipment, killed their people, the Chinese got fed up and they asked the Pakistanis, what should we do? So the Pakistanis said that the Haqqani brothers will be the best guys to sort it out. So the Chinese did a deal with the Haqqani brothers, and the Haqqani brothers began to knock off the Uyghur terrorists. Now, on the 10th of December last year, the Khad, which is the Afghan Secret Service, they went and arrested the Chinese Secret Service hit squad and the Haqqanis and put them into the Pule Charki prison in Kabul. Now the Chinese were screwed because their own people were in the jail and they were negotiating, how do we get these guys out? And the Pakistanis said, in the process of getting your guys out, we can also get our guys out. They put a lot of pressure on the Americans. The Americans didn't relent. Those guys remained incarcerated over there. And when the Chinese ambassador met the Taliban, one of those guy, either he met this, I don't know, I can't remember who he met, just after the fall of Kabul on 15th August, the first thing he said was, please release those guys. So now those Talibanis also very wise. They said, can you please increase the price of copper and sign a new agreement, and then we'll do it and some money change hands and things were fine. Now, the second thing is that the Chinese want to build a highway from Peshawar to Kabul as the first thing. Secondly, they want to extend the railway line of the old frontier mail from Peshawar to Kabul. And they also want to lay an oil pipeline and a gas pipeline from Peshawar to Kabul. Now from Kabul, they want two branches, one branch to go into Tehran and one branch to go into Ashgabat in Turkmenistan. Now, Ashgabat in Turkmenistan is very important because Turkmenistan controls, or not controls, but has a 35% of the world's proven natural gas resources. And the Chinese are tapping that natural gas through a very cumbersome pipeline that goes through Russia and then into China. And it's a very uneconomic way and inefficient way of actually getting that gas into China. So they want to have an alternate route for the gas that comes from Turkmenistan and Iran. And also, there's a division now in the Middle East between the Arabian mainland and the Arabian Peninsula. The Arabian Peninsula has countries like Jordan, UAE, Oman, Saudi Arabia that are aligned with Israel. And the Arabian mainland has Iran, Iraq, Syria that are aligned with the Chinese. So therefore, they want to dominate the Arabian mainland and have an alternative route to pump Iranian and Iraqi oil into China, as opposed to the traditional route of the super tankers flowing through sailing through the Strait of Hormuz and then through the Strait of Malacca, because the Quad Navy, four Quad navies, and particularly the American Navy and the Indian Navy, will be able to blockade their passage through the Strait of Malacca and the Strait of Hormuz. So they want to create an option for themselves. So copper and passage rights through Afghanistan, and then this entire crisis that China is facing with this Evergrande construction company that is going to collapse with $300 billion worth of debt. The debt has arisen because there is no way to consume the yuan that they have printed. They have gone on this major printing spree where they are now in circulation. There are $21 trillion worth of yuan which are floating in China, and they have to be deployed and they have to get a return. Otherwise, the whole system is going to collapse, and this Evergrande is the first manifestation of that happening. Now, for Pakistan to reap the whirlwind, how will they reap the whirlwind? They will reap the whirlwind in two ways. One is that when the Chinese infrastructure project starts and this highway and railways and pipelines are all built, they'll use Pakistani labor, and they'll use Pakistani cement and all sand and things like that for this purpose, and Pakistan will get income. Secondly, Pakistan will now be in the position to have untrammeled control over the $30 billion worth of opium that was exported illegally out of Afghanistan in 2020 as estimated by the United Nations. And this is a conservative estimate. I mean, the higher side is about 45 billion. So depending on market forces and depending on how the Pakistanis have organized the distribution, because after all, they are very clever people. You've got to hand it to them. They are in league with all the drug cartels in South America and in Europe, and they are major suppliers, and they can swing the price of heroin.
They're a very major aspect of the golden crescent.
So the fact of the matter is that Pakistan reaps the whirlwind through Chinese money in building the infrastructure. They'll provide labor, etc., and they'll provide raw materials, and they will be able to now refine the process of opium extraction and distribution. And as you know, that the Chinese hold it against us for having converted 25% of their male population into opium addicts between 1840 and 1939. And the first manifestation was in this Mundra port. They caught some 3,000, I don't know, I can't remember, some several thousand tons of opium that was seized by the Indian customs. And that's just happened right now. So you have a situation where the ISI is going to go berserk because they are going to control everything on the ground, and nobody knows what their game plan is going to be. Of course, you have to balance it on the one hand, they want revenge against India, and second hand, they want to make money, and the third is that they want to expand their influence. Now the question is that will the American senators, 22 senators, be able to gain the ability to have this bill passed? Will sanctions be levied on Pakistan? And or how will the situation develop? We have to wait and see.
Thank you. Thank you, Iqbal, for a whole bunch of very, interesting nuggets. Mukul.
Yeah, I just want to add to Iqbal.
Yes, please.
Iqbal, unfortunately for the Chinese, for the Red Dragon, they have been losing money quite a lot in the last 1 year. And in the last 10 days, perhaps they have lost $1 trillion in the debt market. So, they're great to reach, Central Asia and other places. And, all those pipe dreams, they just fall, we just have to wait for another 5 to 6 months to see the collapse of the great Chinese dream or the great Chinese rejuvenation, as their supreme leader calls it. And I just wanted to add one more thing. This ISI operation in Afghanistan not began in 1987 or 88. It began immediately after losing the war with India in 1971. In 1973, they started this, as Iqbal pointed out, they started this, deep strategic depth concept, and it was formulated under Bhutto, whom Mrs. Gandhi showed a lot of grace to.
Yes, she was very kind to him. She gave him back 93,000, or more prisoners of war without bargaining.
I will just, add one more thing to Iqbal's observation, that the Russians showed the documents, showed Mrs. Gandhi that it means the Iranian forces, Persian under Shah would move. Actually, it was basically, two big powers have their own kind of understanding. And Russians and Americans had that kind of an understanding. Even as recently as June 19, when Biden and Putin met, they had shown that kind. Means Americans will now have the kind of air-based facilities in Central Asia. The same kind of big power accommodation was made in 1971 when the Russians said, now you don't move further because Kissinger and other fellows were getting on their nerves. More than Russian pressure, it was actually means we just accepted we were not in that league of power groups. So anyway, but the situation is, it means for Pakistan, it's not going to be an easy thing because things are really, it's a kind of slow burn. You have in a very bad situation in Balochistan, where Iranians are also stoking the fire. And there have been quite a number of skirmishes between Pakistani and Iranian guards. Then you have the situation, nationalism, the level of nationalism rising in Afghanistan. Through the past few months on social media forums, a lot of things came when which showed that Talibani fighters near on the border were singing the song that Peshawar is ours. So it's not going to be very easy. Let's see how it works out.
Yes, thank you, Mukul, for your very interesting. No, I don't think we are merely, just firing blank shots in the air. Whatever we're saying is based on, well, let's say pattern prediction.
Yeah.
Which we must at least be looking at every angle possible, because our interests, our security is involved, India's. Vinod, please shoot with whatever you have after what all is.
I will have, just two quick points. We should not forget that Pakistan has got about 160, 170 nuclear weapons. And
yes,
that's a very, very important aspect. And that has to be keyed in. And I'm sure the US, when they put the sanctions, they have to key that in. We need a reasonably stable Pakistan on the borders. And like Iqbal said, it is a buffer between the, between Afghanistan and the Arab world and us. And we need that. And
but if I may please stop you here, these nuclear weapons, and you say that a stable Pakistan. Pakistan's character at the moment is that it is ruled by the army, which has all these I don't know how many bloody terrorist group which they themselves have raised, the kind of animal which will bite you at some stage. And what is the guarantee that the nuclear arsenal will remain mahfouz, will remain, secure? Please continue.
That is exactly what I was trying to come at. That when you have a nuclear arsenal and you've created so many of these terrorist groups, and who are going to bite back, like I said, it's very easy to ride a tiger, very difficult to dismount a tiger. So Pakistan, I have seen the Pakistani army, what they've done is they're riding the Taliban tiger. How do they dismount? They don't know how to dismount. They have taken advantage, but now they're going to face a Taliban which will support the TTP, ISIS-K, which will support the extreme ideology. They have the poor masses of Pakistan will be enamored and will be attracted towards jihad. And what does it impact? It impacts the very being of Pakistan. The very idea that they've been trying to protect, the being the world leader of Islam. After 1970, when they realized that the culture and the languages being different, nothing can hold Pakistan and nation state together. So they had to base it on ideology, and ideology of Islam came into being, and that was furthered by General Ziaul Haq in 1977. And they're not only for Pakistan, they imported it to Afghanistan. It took roots. If you look at the history of Afghanistan, and I'm sure Iqbal will bear me out, Afghanistan was a moderately modern state in the 60s and the 70s, early 70s. If you look at the photographs also. So what I'm trying to say is that because of nuclear weapons, one of these, even some of this falling into the hands of the extremist groups, either aided by the Pakistan, I say, because the Pakistan deep state has got many agendas, they've got many factions. The Pakistani army is only one of it. But the ISI can even, there are rumors that the Pakistan DG ISI was pulled up by the Pakistani chief for being in Kabul. So there are factions out there.
Yes, that is. Please throw some light on that.
So if these nuclear weapons were to be found in the wrong hands, not that the very threatened being of the use of nuclear weapons, the world has to cater for it. It's not only India, the world has to cater for it. The most impacted will be the US and the Western world, who are considered the enemy of Islam. So radicalization is to grow, and Pakistani army has also lost respect because most people within Pakistan feel that the Pakistani army is pro-US. They're Americanized many ways, and that's a fact also. So it is not that the Pakistani army, that's why they have to come out with the law. The Pakistani army has come out with a law, a proper legal law, where anyone criticizes the Pakistani army can be subjected to 2 years of imprisonment of 5 lakh rupees, PKR, that's I'm talking about Pakistan rupees, of fines. So there are reasons behind all this. So we have to look at the bigger picture where the nuclear weapons, and I'm not saying that many strategists, even the US, feel that if these nuclear weapons find their way, the very threatening being is going to shake up the world. It is not like other responsible nations. We cannot say Pakistan is a responsible nation. Certainly not. And China also will get impacted. It's not that China will not get impacted. There's nothing. The present vacuum which is created out there, and I hope China goes into. China's got interest. Lithium is another. Copper is one interest. Lithium another interest. Lithium is required for your electric vehicles and whatever you have. And the mother lode of lithium, about $1 trillion worth, is in Afghanistan. And China is looking at lithium in a very big way. So we are looking at a very complicated, confused world, and we find that the AFPAC region has expanded. Epicenter of terrorism expanded from the Pakistan region to the AFPAC region, and this is going to be in the near to. No, we look at other domains, but terrorism is going to take further root. It's going to grow, and we should be prepared as India. Speaking as an Indian, speaking as a military man in India, we should be prepared. We should be thinking ahead on how to stop this at our line of control. And for that, I think we need a 3P strategy. We need a proactive strategy, we need a preemptive strategy, and we need a punitive strategy. Pakistan has to understand that it has crossed the red lines, it will be penalized for that. The punitive operations are very clear, and we have to send exact signals, strategic signals to Pakistan that this is our red line and we cannot cross that. Otherwise, we'll find way back, we will go back to about 5 to 6 years when terrorism had spread not only in Kashmir but all over India, the metros, because Pakistan had the backing and the bases in the US, and they knew that if they had the bases of the US in Pakistan, India will not be allowed to do anything against Pakistan, because the US needed Pakistan to survive, sustain in Afghanistan. So I'll finish out there, but nuclear aspects has to be factored in a big way, otherwise it will go very wrong. We just can't look at the terrorism part of it. Terrorism backed by not nuclear rhetoric anymore, but terrorism backed by the possibility of a nuclear weapon falling into the hands of the terrorists and being a threat.
Thank you, Vinod. Iqbal.
Yeah, I would like to just add a few points over here. 10 years ago, after that, or a little more than 10 years ago, after the 26/11 attack on us, I looked at the website of the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed. And on that website, they were propagating the fact of this Ghazwa-e-Hind, that they want to take over all of North India.
Yes.
And they want to have their Pakistani flag on the Red Fort. Now, the question is that what is the history that is taught to students in Pakistani schools? Their history is of the greatness of the Mughal Empire, that they are the descendants of the Mughal Empire. And all the symbols of the Mughal Empire in India. Unfortunately for them, their entire history is in India. And our history of the, the Saraswati River, and the Saraswati River civilization is all over there in the Swat.
Over there, yes.
So our history is there, their history is here. This is one of the anomalies or paradoxes of partition. Now, the interesting thing is that the second thing is that the Deoband Madrasa is based in India, 150 kilometers from Delhi. And the Deoband Madrasa is the spiritual fountainhead of the two schools of thought. One is the madrasa led by this Maulana Samiul Haq. I don't know whether he's still alive. He was alive during the time of the Soviet Jihad. And this Maulana Zafrul Rahman. Now, between them, they at the peak of the Soviet Jihad controlled about 16,000 madrasas on the Afghan border. And these were churning out all these jihadis. Now, the Deoband ideology is predominantly a very significant ideology of Islam in Pakistan. We have the antidote to that, but unfortunately, no government in India has ever used that as a weapon to sow discord in Pakistan. For some reason, we've just passed it. So now the issue is that, firstly, no Pakistani government will ever bomb North India. Because if they bomb North India, they'll obliterate their own history. Then they'll have to create a new fiction of where they descended from. Because right now their argument is that they've descended from the Mughals. Now, if you actually claim that and you wipe out the entire face of North India with a nuclear attack, say for argument's sake, then your entire history is gone. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that if there's a civil war in Pakistan and all these jihadis take over, where will the Punjabis go? They can only run east towards India. So what is the government of India going to do that in the event when there was that 1971 and there was a Bangladesh war and 10 million Hindu refugees largely came into India? What will happen when 20 million Pakistani Punjabi Muslims will try to cross your border? What will you do? Will you machine gun them? What will you do? Will you lay minefields? How will you deal with that? And for them, it will be really an unforgivable sin if they have to leave their homes and run to sheltered India, into refugee camps here. I don't even know if there will be any refugee camps here or what will happen to those guys or how they'll be pushed out. So that's another thing. So my argument is that the ISI, and I have more faith in the Punjabi Musalman than I have faith in the Pashtun. And the Punjabi Musalman is 100 times more cleverer than a Pashtun. And he will run circles around and make a fool of them and ensure that their nuclear arsenal is intact. So, I mean, that's the most important thing. Now, I'll just tell you that
I hope you're right on that. Yes, you have a point, but I hope you're right.
Now, this point I want to make about made by General Bhatia about this lithium. You see, this was a disinformation spread by the Pakistanis that the US has gone, they have taken away 200, they've left 263 aircraft. The Taliban has got one of the largest air forces in the world, which is waiting for them. And I mean, we all know that all the American contractors ran the Afghan Air Force. And when they left in July, they took all the electronics out and none of the helicopters could work. So out of 263, hardly 10, 15 helicopters are working, aircraft are working. The rest were either flown out or they were sabotaged. So the US Geological Survey of 2020 doesn't list lithium as a mineral found in Afghanistan. So either you believe the US Geological Survey of 2020 or you believe the WhatsApp University, which says that lithium is the country abundant with minerals. There are trillions of dollars worth of minerals. I'm just saying that are those Americans donkeys or duffers that if there were trillions of dollars worth of minerals and they are sitting and rare earths, they said there are rare earths worth trillions of dollars, those WhatsApp messages going around, that for 20 years they were sitting there and they did nothing about it. I mean, come on, give the Americans the basic intelligence that if there were so many minerals, they would have mined them. So I don't buy this. My basic understanding is this, that look, these chaps have produced these jihadis because there are bogeymen to extract money from the Americans. And yes, I agree with General Bhatia that they will intensify terrorism because the Pakistan army is now a part and parcel of the Chinese army. And let's be very clear, the Indus River has two big Chinese dams which are being constructed over there. And those Chinese dams are being constructed because they're going to generate electricity, which, by the way, is not going to be consumed by Pakistan, but is going to be directed towards Xinjiang, because the Chinese semiconductor industry has now relocated itself into Xinjiang because of the availability of water. And our danger that we face is that the Chinese want physical control over the tributaries of the Indus, the Nubra River, the Shyok River, the Galwan River.
That water is very important.
because for 30 years, there is going to be a major surge of water, and hydrographic surveys have confirmed this fact that this is going to, glacial melt is the cause of this, and it's going to last for 30 years. And that's why they built those dams to capture the water, and they want to deny us the possibility of ever doing any run-of-the-river projects in Ladakh. You know the kind of problems we had with the Kishanganga project, where they tested our will and where they were continuously shelling us every day virtually. And they want to ensure that we have no control over that. So you should expect that the Chinese strategy is to thrust forward to actually push us to the west bank of the Indus. And that is their ultimate goal. Now, the fact is that how do we thwart that goal and how do we, prevent that from happening? Because the genesis of terrorism in Kashmir is to prevent any infrastructure projects happening that will enable India to tap into the run of the river, 20% of the water of the Indus, the Jhelum and the Chenab, which is our right under that one-sided pro-Pakistani 1960 Indus Waters Treaty that has been bequeathed to us by Pandit Nehru. And that's also a very interesting fact, that why did he sign that treaty when Pakistan was sitting in Indian territory and there was a ceasefire? So why did he then give that land without a quid pro quo? I mean, I asked that question, nobody has the answer. So my assessment is that with the Pakistani army integrated with the Chinese army, your border with China actually goes from the Makaran coast all the way to Burma. It's one theater controlled by one unified command. And everything done, and every plan and every strategy and every initiative is well thought out and they know what their objectives are, they know what their prices are, and we can laugh and joke about this opium and all of that because it's very entertaining. But there's a bigger design that's at play, and that's what we need to be wary about.
In fact, I was just coming to that final, final comment from all three of you. That this opium, now does Afghanistan, stand the risk of all the Taliban forcing everyone to, grow more opium rather than food grains?
No, they won't grow more opium because then the price might fall. They will only grow that much that will enable the price to be held and to keep it increasing 5 to 10% every year.
Okay. Okay. Yes, Mukul.
The best way to crash the opium market is to start opium production in areas where the Brits used to do Mandsaur and
Malwa opium, Bengal, Bihar opium.
Collapse. You don't worry, there are various ways to handle this.
Excellent. Brilliant idea.
So,
in any case, in India, we have societies where opium was a social, it will, like alcohol is, opium was a social drug, or a social drug, not something which you consider as
not a social drug, a social intoxicant.
Intoxicant, sorry.
Afim di goli.
Vinod, anything from you, please?
No, thank you. I think we have had a very interesting discussion. But I do feel that India will have to look after its own interests. We've done well in Afghanistan till now, and we should look after our own interests, which is spelled out by almost everyone. And we'll have to look at China and Pakistan as one now. It's like collaborative policy of what we're talking about.
And a pointed question to you as a special forces man: should we not be should we not build a capacity and capability which we have for cover ops, which way back Mr. Gujral had paid too?
I think putting it very plainly in open forum, we are a responsible nation, and we should look at we should not. We cannot condone what we condemn. We condemn terrorism. We cannot condone it. So covered capabilities and all are not for responsible nations like India.
No,
we have intelligence agencies. They will go for intelligence agencies. But I think terrorism, my view is that terrorism in any form, whenever we encourage, comes back to
No. I did not mean terrorism. No, I meant special forces.
We have in the military domain, we have the capabilities. We are by far one of the more respected capabilities in that sense. In the military domain, I'm talking about. We have our special forces, which is one of the best. I'm a proud. I belong to.
Yes, we're aware that when foreign army guys come and compete with you all, they have a very tough time.
We beat most of them.
And I believe sometimes they need to blow the bell. Blowing the bell means, sorry, am I right?
Well, you're right. Absolutely. We should know that we have the capabilities, and when required, we have also, we will deliver. Period.
Thank you very much.
Anil, I'd like one last word.
Quickly,
and,
please.
I endorse Vinod's viewpoint that we are very capable, and I say that we are very strong tactically as far as the military is concerned. But where this country is weak is strategically. And we are very weak strategically, and we don't have the political will to make strategic decisions. Because you see, for example, this 75 billion recurring trade deficit with China, the government should have a 5-year plan to actually dismantle this trade deficit and bring it down to $15-20 billion, which is manageable. But they have no plan, and nobody's thinking along those lines. And these are all knee-jerk reactions that are happening. So we need to move out of knee-jerk strategic
very planned strategic
and plan something which is comprehensive and internally consistent and acceptable. We are a democracy. There has to be a political consensus in this country. that this is what we are planning to do, because our economy has been deindustrialized by the Chinese. We have been badly hit. Our factories have, manufacturing has ceased. Where is the employment going to come from?
Iqbal, it's not China which had deindustrialized us. We have deindustrialized ourselves, but now I think the situation is reversing. The productivity, production-linked incentive schemes have been introduced. And basically the deficit lies in the area of specialty chemicals and pharmaceutical products. I think in the next 2 to 3 years, you will see the bridge is very well covered. The deficit will be very well covered.
Let's hope so.
Yeah.
Let's hope so.
It will take
No, I think he has a point, Iqbal, because after all, touch wood, the stock market, as if that's going great guns, then that means our production.
Stock market has got no connection with reality. It's the overpriced, overheated stock market, where because you've got another 1.5–2 crore retail investors that have come in. It's a casino. That's nothing else. Don't rely on the strength of this economy on what the stock, where the stock prices are today. As easily as they've gone up, they can come down.
They can come down, of course.
Very easily, within days.
Anyway, all three of you gentlemen, thank you very much for some very, very strong, significant and pertinent points that have been put out. And I only end with the hope that we do everything keeping our security, India's security interests, and do everything accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jai Hind.
Thank you all.